Welcome to the Money Report Unfiltered. Today we have a report from the Urban Institute saying 40% of Americans experienced some financial hardship in 2018. 40% of Americans. Now, what is more staggering than that is 40% of Americans reported a financial hardship in 2017. So think about that. 40% of Americans, 2017, 2018, nothing's changed. Why are so many Americans having financial hardship when supposedly we have a 10-year economic expansion, we have a 10-year bull run in the stock market, everything is supposed to be great, and yet so many Americans are suffering financially? So we're going to get into the details of this report. But before we do that, I'd like to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button and also hit the notification bell so you're notified when we upload more content. So digging into the report a little bit deeper, it shows that almost 25% of Americans had multiple hardships in 2018. Multiple hardships. And the number was basically the same from 2017. So again, this is staggering information here. So many people are experiencing difficulty paying their rent or their mortgage on time, paying partial payments on their rent or mortgage, having problems paying utility bills. And of course, one of the biggest issues with financial hardship are medical bills. So you have unmet medical expenses. So you think about the combination of being late on rent, not being able to pay your utilities in full, not having enough money for food, and then having this growing expense of unmet medical expenses. It's very difficult for me to think about so many people struggling financially. And so what I'd like to do is give you some keys to overcoming financial hardship. Everybody's experienced it. If you haven't, chances are you're probably going to run into something, unfortunately, that you'll have to deal with in the future. And there are some real keys to being able to overcome financial hardship. So we're going to get into those right now. I'll leave a link to the report from the Urban Institute down in the description below, along with some other resources you might want to consider if you're having some difficulty financially and you're trying to think of ways to improve your situation. So my keys to overcoming financial hardship. The first one is you have to assess your financial situation. So many people don't even really balance their checkbook anymore. That's not even really a thing anymore. If you want to know how much money you have in the bank, you just log into your banking app, see if there's money in there, right? So that doesn't really assess your financial situation. What you have to do is sit down, do the work. You have to lay out all of your expenses, everything that you pay throughout the month. List that all out in one big list of everything that you pay. And you can do this on just any Excel spreadsheet or Google sheet. You list all of your expenses out. You write the name of who you pay the bill to or where you are spending the money, and write down the dollar amount next to that. What I like to do is take a 6-month average. Some people take a 3 or 4 month average, but basically a lot of these expenses are the same things that you're paying every single month. And once you've got all of that listed out, the next thing to do is separate that into 4 categories. Okay? Only 4 categories. This is the only thing you need to do, is separated into 4 categories. You have your housing expenses, you have your living expenses, you have your wants or lifestyle expenses, and then you have your goals. So again, 4 categories: housing, living, lifestyle, goals. What I've done over the years is I have separated those buckets by percentages. And so for housing, I've limited that to 30%. So that includes rent, mortgage insurance if you have it, home insurance, and utilities. This may not sound like a lot, but when you list out all of your expenses, you have to assign percentages to it. So The percentages may be different depending on where you live or what your financial goals are, what your lifestyle goals are. But for me, it's 30% housing, 30% living, 20% lifestyle, and 20% goals. So I think of it as the 30-30-20-20 budgeting method. There's lots of different ways to do it. This is just the way that I've done it. Now, once you're done listing all of your expenses and then separating them into these 4 different categories, the next thing you need to do is focus on your goals. What are your goals in overcoming this financial hardship, right? Is it to pay off a large medical expense, pay off maybe credit card debt? If you're experiencing a situation where expenses just continue to come up and you don't have any emergency funds to be able to deal with that when it happens. Maybe one of your goals is to have an emergency fund. So remember, financial hardship is a situation where you're having difficulty paying your rent on time, paying your utility bills in full, covering your food expenses each month, or having to deal with some unmet expense. In most cases, that's usually some unmet healthcare expense. Now, the third thing you have to do is once you have identified what that goal is, you have to decide how much money you need, not how much money you have, how much money you need to accomplish that goal, right? If you have $20,000 in credit card debt and you're struggling to pay your credit card bills, your goal is to pay off your credit card debt. So you have to decide how much do you need in order to accomplish that and the time frame that you've established to meet that goal. So many people, when they're trying to overcome financial hardship, their focus is, well, how much do I have? And you have to change that mindset to say, okay, how much do I need? If you've done this assessment, right, you've listed out your expenses, you've put them in the 4 buckets, you've decided on what your goal is, and you have figured out how much money you need to accomplish that goal, right? Then the next thing is understanding what your shortfall is. If you are $100 short, $500 short, $1,000 short every month on being able to accomplish this goal, then you have to go back into these other buckets. First, your lifestyle. Look at where you can find additional money in your lifestyle expenses that you can put towards your financial goals. The next thing is your living expenses. I can tell you one of the biggest things people spend money on is a car. They overspend on transportation. Maybe it's a situation where you need to downsize on a vehicle or downgrade on a vehicle. Maybe that's a different way of looking at it. But that's a very difficult decision because we're so wrapped up in our cars. You don't need a big expensive car, especially if it's causing financial hardship or it's limiting your ability to reach your financial goals. The other thing that people tend to spend too much money on is groceries. They overspend on food. I'm sure if you look at the money that you spend on food, there's probably a good $50 to $100 a month that you can put towards your financial goals. All of that extra stuff, you don't think about it. You're just at the grocery store or you're just online and you buy it. But that's the stuff that people tend to forget about when they're trying to overcome a financial hardship. And then, of course, the last is housing. In most cases, you really don't have an option to change your living situation. A lot of people aren't going to sell their house and downgrade to a smaller house. They're not going to relocate to a less expensive area in the country. A lot of people feel like this is where I'm at and I just have to make it work where I'm at. That's fine, but what you have to do is think about how much you're spending on your housing expenses. Can you reduce your cable bill? Can you reduce the usage of electricity? These are things that you have to do. Now, these are things that people don't want to think about, right? Nobody wants to think about having to reduce their cable bill or maybe even go without cable for 6 months. These are the things that comfort us, especially during times of financial hardship. It's the same thing with food. We look for these comforting things. You have to change your mindset and focus on your goals. Overcoming hardship is sometimes more difficult than the hardship itself because it takes longer to get out of the hardship than it took to get into it. And that involves making some very tough decisions on how to change what you spend your money on so that you can accomplish that goal in a much faster way. And I can assure you, having done this myself and been around other people that have done this, it's so much more satisfying once you've achieved your financial goal and you've now established a good foundation for how to manage your money, what to spend your money on, and be prepared if another financial hardship should occur again. Going back to the report, almost 25% of Americans have experienced multiple hardships, not only in 2017, but also in 2018. So chances are it's going to happen again. Nobody wants to think about that. You have to be prepared. So those were just a few keys on how to begin overcoming hardship. And I hope that was really helpful for you. If it was, please remember to hit the subscribe button and also hit that notification bell so you can be notified when we post more content. And until next time, this is the Money Report Unfiltered.